One of the problems I face every year when it comes to Christmas time is people asking me what I want as a filmmaker as like a gift. And most of the time, filmmaking gifts are incredibly expensive. So I actually went through my gear, my equipment, and picked out some of the more affordable stuff to share what I think are some actually like good gifts for filmmakers that aren't, so I mean, some of them are really cheap, but some of them are kind of around that like $100, $200 range. So some are a little bit more expensive, but nothing here is like thousands and thousands of dollars, because filmmaking equipment can be quite expensive, but a lot of this stuff is relatively affordable and I think are really good tools that work really kind of however you or the person you're getting the gift for, however they film. So I'd like to start with one of my personal favorites, is these Aperture MC lights. These are really cool. They come in this nice little pouch, and they're just little LED lights that work great. The reason I like these is because they're around like, I think $70 or $80. Prices change. But what I like about them a lot is that they're relatively bright for what they are, and they can do kind of any color of the rainbow. So you have full RGB control. You can make it red, you can make it blue, you can make it green, anything in between. And you can just do full daylight or tungsten color balance. And they work really, really well as just a nice little light that you can put anywhere. You really can't have too many of these. So even if someone already had one or two, you could get them a third or a fourth. And they're really nice and they're cheap. And they're actually magnetic on the back. So they'll, stick to things, metal surfaces and whatnot, which it comes in handy oftentimes on set, as well as there's a little 1/4-20 mounting point on the bottom. So just a really cool, easy to use, rechargeable LED light. It's USB-C rechargeable, and it just works really well for those times where you want to put a little accent in the background, or you just want to add a little extra pop somewhere, something that's small, lightweight, can fit in almost any bag. And you don't need to use this carrying case. This has some extra accessories in it, but you don't need it. It's just one of those things that I think anyone would be kind of happy with. Another thing that I used in that demonstration was these A clamps, and these are really cheap. These are like $1 or $2 at Home Depot or Lowe's. You can find them at any kind of hardware store. And I only put these on the table because that's another thing that is just really helpful in so many different situations. So maybe this is more like a stocking stuffer, but $1 or $2 and you get these nice little clamps that are really heavy duty. I've had these ones for probably close to 10 years now, and they just hold up and they're great for grabbing things, clamping things. You can even run screws and stuff through these holes if you want to kind of put a 1/4-20 pin through there, and you can mount a light or even a camera in situations. I've done that with like GoPros and lightweight cameras. Really cool, really easy, and you can never have enough of these clamps. I also really like these wireless microphones. These are the Komika, they're the Boom XD. They have a newer version of this now, but I thought I'd put these on the table because the newer version is not, it does have more features, but this one is still great. There's nothing wrong with this one. It's actually the microphone that you're listening to me right now. I have another one of these on, and you can kind of hear the sound quality there. But I really like these because they're 2 microphones to 1 receiver. So basically you can have 2 different people talking and all on 1 receiver straight to a camera, which makes it really easy and compact. I think these were like $200 when they were new, but now since there's a new version out, you might be able to get these even cheaper. And the only thing I'd say about these is the packs themselves are great. They're a 2.4 gigahertz frequency, so it's not UHF. There's not scanning through different radio frequencies basically. They just kind of connect and they just work. And there are times where there's some interference in like heavily populated areas, but I'd say 99% of the time they just kind of always work, even from relatively far distances. So I like these a lot. I use them all the time. They're really good for kind of having 2 different microphones on 1 single camera. And like I said, these original versions are probably cheaper now. There's also the Rode Wireless Go 2, but that's more expensive, and these are a really nice affordable alternative. The only thing I would recommend if you're gonna buy these for somebody is you might wanna throw in a slightly better microphone. The microphone that comes with the Komika is not great. The Rode microphone I think works a lot better. This is the Rode Go microphone, and it works with these just fine, but I think it sounds a little bit nicer. So these are a little bit more expensive, but kind of worth it for sound quality, and I picked up a few of them, and that's again what you're listening to me on. It's the Rode Go microphone, the actual capsule microphone with the Komika mic packs that just work really, really well, I think. One thing you could get your filmmaker, person of interest, I don't know, your significant other, whoever you're buying the gift for, is some filters, some really nice filters. I think this is something that a lot of filmmakers maybe don't consider or feels like an added expense they don't really want to justify. I think it's worth it. These Tiffin, this is the black satin, but there's also the black pro mist, there's the soft effects. They come in different strengths and filter sizes. I would definitely recommend the 82 millimeter filter size for most applications. Most lenses should be about 82 millimeter filter thread or smaller, and you can always step down. But I really like these. They just add a nice little soft glow to your footage, and you can get various strengths. So like something like this is the quarter, this is the black satin quarter. I think there's a black satin eighth, which would be even less than, and that's what you're looking at right now. So this video is filmed with the black satin quarter, and I really like how it looks. And it's one of those nice little touches. I think these are like 150 bucks. So it's a little bit more expensive for something that's essentially just a piece of glass that sits in front of your camera, but that's why I think a lot of filmmakers don't tend to get them or invest in them, because it feels like a little bit too expensive for kind of what you get. But that's why I think they make a great gift, because it's right at that price point where it's probably reaching, but maybe it's, you know, someone you really care about and you want to spend a little bit more money and get them something really nice. I would look at something like this. You don't have to get the Tiffin ones. There's other brands and all sorts of different shapes, sizes, and intensities. But for my general usage, I think the black satin quarter, again, the 82 millimeter filter thread, just works really well for a lot of scenarios where you want it to just look a little bit nicer, get that extra little mwah on your footage. I should have mentioned it before, but with the Rode microphones and the Comica mic packs, these Rycoat stickies are super cheap, and they're just a really easy way to attach microphones. So if you're doing a wireless setup, you need to put the microphone somewhere, and these stickies are double-sided. So you have one side where you put the microphone, and I'll show you how I do this real quick. You just take the microphone and you stick it to one side, really, really easy. And then the other side, you peel away and you stick that to the clothing, typically under the clothing. I like to hide microphones. I don't like microphones popping out and you see them and it looks more like the news, or like, I don't know, just something like like a low budget documentary. I like stuff to look more like film, like if we're talking about filmmakers. So hiding microphones I think is really important. And this is a great way to hide a microphone pretty much anywhere, and they're really cheap. They come in these packs. You can get them up to like a 100 pack for like $20 or $30, and they just work great. You can stick them anywhere, and then, I don't know, it looks a little bit better than tape or something like that. Speaking of tape, gaffer's tape is another really helpful thing that pretty much any filmmaker can use, and very affordable. I think it's like 20 or 30 bucks a roll. Again, prices change all the time, so it's hard to tell nowadays what exactly stuff costs depending on the size. But I like this gaff tape. It's the thicker style, and I like that because I can rip a smaller slice if I need to. But if I need to tape down cables or something, I have the really thick, wide. I think this is 3-inch gaff, but there's 2-inch, there's 1-inch, there's smaller spike tape. There's all sorts of types of filmmaker tape, and gaff tape is really nice because it pulls up clean and it's not super duper sticky. These Rycoat stickies do actually hold really well. So even under clothes, they're not super glue, but they hold pretty well. Gaff tape is one of those nicer things where it's not gonna cling to everything super tight. You can remove it pretty easily, and it's just a great thing to have in pretty much any filmmaker kit. And because it's kind of a consumable good, you're always gonna need more of it. You run out, so even if you buy a roll for somebody who has some, well, now they have their backup roll for when that one's finished. So you really can't go wrong by getting somebody gaff tape. It's kind of a silly Christmas present, like tape, but I'm pretty sure any filmmaker would appreciate having it in their kit. Another thing that's valuable for most kits is some kind of multi-tool. This isn't something I use all the time, but when I have a problem and I need a solution, it's almost always gonna need a multi-tool. And having these, even if it's an extra one or a spare one, or maybe the person already has a few, you can't have enough of them because oftentimes you have multiple cases, multiple bags, and maybe that's the one that doesn't have the multi-tool in it. So having a few of these on hand for any filmmaker I think is really important, and you can get these, the really expensive kind, the really cheap kind, really whatever fits your budget, you can find a multi-tool that's gonna work. In addition to these Tiffin filters, I find these flip out rings also helpful in a lot of situations. So basically the way this works is you attach this side to the camera and then you put the filter here, and it's basically a swing away filter. So you can swing the filter out of the way if it's a ND, maybe it's a variable ND or a fixed ND, and now you have this really convenient, instead of a built-in ND system or built-in filter system, you can just kind of swing the ND out of the way, have your kind of clear shot, roll this way, and then if you step outside or any situation where you need your filters back, you just flip them in place. And these are like $20 or $30, really cheap, very convenient. The only time they really cause any problem is when you have a lens that's really, really wide and you're stacking multiple filters. At a certain point, you're gonna end up seeing the filters, but as far as a gift for a filmmaker, or even photographer for that matter, this is something that I find really helpful. I would recommend, again, the 82mm size. That way you can always step down to fit the lens that it's being attached to. But I find this something I don't use all the time, but certainly in situations where I want to kind of run and gun and have filters just able to like swap right at a moment's notice, it's really helpful. Another thing I like to have is tri-tap. These are, $5, maybe less than that. And so small, convenient, fits right in a bag. And that way you just always have enough power. So if you're buying a gift for a filmmaker, chances are they have lights, they have stuff they need to plug in, things to charge. Get them a couple tri-taps. They're really affordable. Again, kind of that stocking stuffer size gift, but something that you can never have enough of. You always end up losing these, or you need them when you don't have them. I always just keep them in my bag. That way I have as much power as I need, because half the time I go to places and I'm trying to plug into an outlet and there's only like 1 or 2 outlets. This way you get to expand that pretty quickly, especially if you stack them. Or you can get something a little bit bigger, like one of these. Now you don't have to get this one specifically. I think it's kind of cool, but this is basically just a power strip, but it's built more like a tower. And I like this one because it has so many USB ports, as well as all of the outlets that are spaced apart, so it's less likely that things are gonna jam up on top of each other. And I like this one specifically because it has such a long cable already built into it. It's almost like it has a built-in extension cord, which most of the time you don't necessarily want the power strip right next to the outlet. So being able to put it a good distance away is really helpful in a lot of situations. I think something like this is great if you have someone who has a lot of batteries that they need to charge. That way everything can be plugged in, charged all in one little spot, one little station. You don't have batteries over here, batteries over there, stuff charging over here on USB or over there on the computer. It can all charge right together. So some kind of power strip, like a big kind of heavy duty with a lot of ports, a lot of options, I think is really nice for most filmmakers, because they're gonna need it, whether it's in their office or whether they're out in the field doing production. Next to that, we've got one of my favorites, a little bit more expensive, but this is a C-stand. However, it's a little mini C-stand. Most C-stands, I think, are kind of too big for most purposes. So having something that's a little bit smaller actually comes in handy. And this one has the turtle base, which I find really helpful. That way it can just collapse on itself for travel, and you can just spin it apart to kind of set it up and put it on the ground. And this one still gets plenty tall, right? And that's often as tall as I need a C-stand to be. Sometimes I want to hire if it's like a boom mic or something like that, and I have C-stands for that purpose. But as far as a gift for somebody that's kind of more lightweight, more travel friendly, I think these this is a 20-inch C-stand. I think these work really well, and they're a little bit more expensive, but it's why I think a lot of people don't buy them. They buy photo stands, the cheaper, $15, $20 stands that can kind of be plasticky, or they have the cheap metal. These C-stands are great because they're sturdy, they're robust, they're not gonna really move much, especially if you have a sandbag on it. And they hold up over time. They don't really break all that often. I think every C-stand I have, none of them have broken yet. Of course, I probably just jinxed myself, but I do find this smaller size really convenient, especially as like a kind of gift fun thing, especially if someone's opening the package and it's like really heavy. You're gonna think like, what is in here? This is so heavy, because these are pretty heavy. And I think they'll be pleasantly surprised that you gave them a C-stand. Or you could get them one of my favorite tripods, and this is really my favorite tripod. This is the Slick, the 700DX. This tripod is the best. I found this tripod maybe close to 10 years ago, and I haven't stopped using it. I've bought many of them because it's just so useful. This is a photography tripod for the most part, but I think it works great for filmmaking because oftentimes you're in situations where you want the tripod to have a slightly different angle, get higher, get lower. Photography tripods have this lovely feature that lets you just kind of raise up and telescope without changing the legs. And that's the downside to almost every video or filmmaker tripod, is that if you want to change the height of the tripod, you've got to break the legs, which is really annoying. You're over here, you're fighting with this one, you're fighting with that one, you're fighting with that one, trying to get them all level. Of course, you probably have a heavy camera on it at the time, and it just becomes really irritating dealing with that. This, you can just raise your camera up and down a significant distance, and once it's locked down, it's not going anywhere. It's sturdy. The other great thing about having the tripod, the photography tripod, is that you can shoot vertical if you need to. Nowadays, a lot of filmmakers, video production professionals are shooting for TikTok or for social media, and being able to just pop the camera vertical is a huge time saver compared to traditional filmmaking tripod where the head is fixed. Now, on a video tripod, the benefit would be having some kind of fluid head that makes panning and tilting a lot more smooth. That's great if you're doing like live action like sports or anything like that, but for most purposes nowadays, I find the panning and tilting not all that important. Again, it depends on the project, but having something like this is great. It works great for time lapses. You can even mount this upside down. So you can take this whole piece out, which is really cool. So when you take this bottom off, this whole piece comes out, and you can invert it. So you can basically run the rod up the bottom, and you can have really, really low angles if you want to do something like that. So I find this one, this is the Slick 700DX. It's just my favorite. I don't know. They work well. Oh, the one other thing that I really like, and I'll kind of have to undo this to show you, is the way the plate. So a lot of video tripods have a quick release plate that is some kind of, you need a screw underneath the camera. This one is just this really smart design that's kind of like this disc. So basically you can just twist the 1/4-20 right into the camera. Then once it's on the bottom, which I could show you if I had a different camera, you basically can just pop the camera in and then turn it any which way you want, lock it down. It's not going anywhere, there's no problem. But putting it on and taking it off is as easy as just like twisting like something. Compared to needing a screwdriver or any kind of hardware to put the plate on the camera, I just think this design works a whole lot better. And you get the, I don't know, it's just a good all-around tripod that works for 90% of applications. I take them everywhere, I use them for almost everything. And unless I need something that specifically requires a fluid head, I'm gonna go for something like this. Even on bigger cameras like the Ursa Mini, this still works great. Now this one might look like a tripod, and it has a tripod base built in, but it's actually an invisible kind of selfie stick for a 360 camera. This is quite a bit more expensive than a lot of the other stuff, but if you really want to go all out and get your filmmaker friend or relative something good, I really like these 360 cameras because they're, again, one of those things that a lot of people I don't think are gonna buy necessarily themselves. And while there's not a lot of use for it as like a primary camera, as a fun secondary or experimental camera to get some really cool shots, I think of this kind of like a drone. It's there for those specialty shots, or like a GoPro, or any other kind of specialty camera. These 360 cameras are a lot of fun and can allow for some really creative angles, and a lot of people may stay away from it. They want to spend their money on just their primary camera, their primary camera kit. This is a nice supplemental accessory that kind of goes with everything that can be a lot of fun in a lot of different situations. And of course, this is just the extension that goes on the bottom, but the camera itself is really small, fits right in the palm of your hand. This is the Insta360 ONE X2, but there's cheaper ones. I think there's 360 cameras now that are like $100, $200. This one's a little bit more expensive, but something like that. I think it's just a fun thing to play around with, especially for your, people who are into video. Doing 360 video is kind of cool and kind of neat. And then this is just the extension that kind of telescopes out, and then you can do some really cool stuff. And because it sits right underneath the camera, it's essentially invisible to the 360 degrees. So it's an invisible selfie stick, is what they call it. But you could kind of put it anywhere and do all sorts of cool stuff, especially for like action sports or any kind of like, I don't know, vlogging. I think they're just a really neat thing to have in your kit. As well as something else that's a little bit more expensive, but I think highly worth it. This is an Anton Bauer. This is the Triton base battery. So it's a battery, but it sits right under the camera. And what I like about it is that this little plate here that I have, it's the spot for the plate that's mounted to the camera. The camera just nests right in there. So now I've got this huge battery it's not heavy per se. It is heavier than the camera by itself, so don't think it's lightweight. But it's not super duper heavy, but it sits right underneath the camera, so the camera still sits nice and flat and flush. But now I've got extended battery life for any camera because they have these little dummy batteries that can plug in here. And basically you can power from this base into the camera, and the battery life on this camera is maybe like 45 minutes to an hour, maybe over an hour if you have a nicer battery. With this base, I can extend the battery life up to like 12 hours. It's insane how much extra battery life you get out of these for running just a camera. And then the beauty of it is once you have these kind of dummy battery adapters, you have multiple ports. So there's USB and P-tap, 3 of them. So you could power a phone, theoretically. You could charge a phone, you could power a monitor, you could power so much off of just this one battery. That way you don't have 3, 4, 5 different batteries for all the different devices. You just have one battery built in, basically nested right under the camera, and it can power everything from that one thing. Now, the more you power, the faster the battery is gonna deplete. So that 12-hour battery life is gonna go down to like 5 hours and then down to like 2 hours. But still, you can power so much from these. And they are a little bit more expensive. They're on the pricey side. But as far as having like an all-in-one battery solution for kind of the indie filmmaker or the run and gun filmmaker, I really, really like these because it just gives me that peace of mind. It's only one thing I need to charge, and it can basically get me through a whole day of filming. Finally, the last thing on my list is shoes. Oddly enough, I really like these shoes, and everyone has their own style preference, so maybe this isn't for you or the person you're buying them for, but I really like these shoes specifically for production because they're actually the food service shoes, but that means they're anti-slip. And these are like Skechers, I think they're food service or work service, something like that, but they're anti-slip. So they have these really grippy bottoms, and I find them incredibly comfortable just to be on your feet all day long when you're filming. I mean, it's very rare that you'd be like sitting down for long periods of time. You're up and about, you're running around, you're filming, you're working. Having comfortable shoes is really important, and especially ones that have that kind of extra safety of like, you're not gonna slip around, and something that's breathable and just kind of black and not really like loud in your face, distracting. Speaking of, if you ever want to get a filmmaker any kind of material or a piece of clothing, I'd recommend something black, just like a t-shirt or black pants, black shoes. It just is one of those nice things to have as someone who shoots video. If I'm in a reflection or I'm in the background somewhere, I just have like dark black clothes that aren't going to stand out like bright neon or something crazy. Again, everyone's got their own particular style, but if I had to recommend a pair of shoes, when I found these Skechers ones, these are the work slip resistant Skechers. When I found these, I fell in love, and I actually bought quite a few pairs of these because they work so well. They're comfortable, they don't slip, and they're not that expensive as far as shoes go. So they just work really, really well. What are they saying here? They're air-cooled memory foam, slip resistant. Anyway, just kind of a silly add-on. Not quite what you would expect as a recommendation for maybe a filmmaker, as it's not really gear like the rest of the stuff on the table, but I do really, really like them. So that's it. That's the best I could think of as far as stuff that I actually use. All this stuff is in my kit and I use weekly, if not daily. So it's not like silly gimmick stuff. It's all valuable. It's all worthwhile. Again, prices change all the time, so you just kind of have to shop around, find the best deals, and kind of get something that's going to work for you and the person you're buying for.